But we want to provide, in my office, we want to provide relationship dentistry. We get to know these patients. We get to know their families. Like I said, I'm out in the community. I see the patients, kids, families, all kinds of stuff like that. And that's the kind of healthcare that I do want to provide at the end of the day.
Welcome, everybody. Another episode of Practice Prosperity. We have a special guest, Dr. Majors. He owns his own dental practice, and I think his journey is going to be different because he really built his from the ground up. He's going to tell about his journey on how he selected his location to practice and how he get the competency to practice on his own. So welcome to our show today.
Thank you. Thank you, Randall. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on here today.
Awesome. So to start everybody out, can you please explain your practice and the type of patients that you serve?
So my practice is a single doctor office, dental practice. I am a general practitioner, so I do a wide range of procedures. I do crowns, bridges, I can do veneers, I do implants, I do Invisalign. Any general dentistry procedure. I can take out wisdom teeth. I do sedate patients with oral sedation. So I do a wide gambit of general dentistry procedures. Now, my practice is a 6 operatory office in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I have 2 hygienists, 2 dental assistants, and I have 2 team members in the front office staff. We started in December of 2020, and right now our office is pretty much at full capacity. It's so full, we've actually started to we've just dropped our second insurance because we just have so many patients, we don't have the room to see them, and dropping insurance is one way to do that. And so that's pretty much where we're at. We're in a suburb of Tennessee, so pretty much we see just about anybody, all ages, all pretty much full families, all of that. And we're in the neighborhood, so it's just families, kids just come from all over to see us.
What's it like being a neighborhood dentist? Like, can you go to the grocery store without bumping into a potential patient or a former patient? Like, you probably see so many people, and given the town size that you live in, you're kind of that guy, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yes, we actually have a Publix that's right across the street. There's a Kroger right down the street. There's a Costco down the street. If I go to any of those places, I'm guaranteed to see a patient. But it's funny because a lot of times patients are used to seeing me with a mask on. So if I'm in the grocery store without a mask, then they immediately say, "You look familiar," but I don't. But I'll recognize them first, and I'll say something to them, and they'll stare for a second. And then I'll tell them who I am, and they're like, "Yes, I don't recognize you without the mask on." But I enjoy it. It's not. I don't. I don't have. I'm not the kind of person that's. If I see you in public, I think I'm above you or anything like that. I am out in the community. My son actually goes to elementary school right across the street from where my office is. So we do a lot of community events involving the elementary school. So it is that's actually one of the reasons why I did get into dentistry, and being a Black dentist, being a minority practice owner, all of that, I do stand out in the community. Not to sound arrogant or anything like that, but it's there's only 3.8% of Black dentists in the United States of America. So few and far between. And when I got into dentistry, the mentor that I had, he was a Black dentist as well. And I saw him go out in the community. I saw him go out and just fellowship, or just he was very involved in everything that he did. And I pretty much want to emulate everything that he did.
I think that's cool. I think it's real cool. Now, there's something that's happening I see in the medical industry where the large companies are gobbling up practices.
Mhm.
What made you go independent versus maybe be affiliated with a larger hospital practice? Because I'm seeing that on a consistent basis, and I'm wondering, how does the practitioner think about this happening in the market?
So I actually worked for a big corporation prior to opening up my own office. Big corporations, they're not going away. There's not much that we can do about that because there is a need or there's a landscape that's for them. Um, for me being a private practitioner, I have more of a say in what I want to do, how I want to practice. That's why I brought up dropping insurances because dental insurance companies, they want to dictate procedures and things that we feel are not necessary towards patients, or they things that we feel necessary. The insurance company may say, hold up, I don't want to pay for that, so I don't think that's necessary, so you shouldn't be doing that. And that's not how healthcare should be provided. Healthcare should be in the hands of the practitioner. They're the ones who are in the patients, seeing the patient, assessing them, taking care of their entire well-being. And to have somebody in a corporate office deny an insurance claim because they feel like they don't want to distribute the money for that procedure, that takes away from total healthcare, or that takes away from healthcare as a whole. Um, Now, I do feel, well, like I said, just being a private practice owner, I do feel like that it's not going away. There's quite a few dentists that feel like that private practice has a place, and there's patients that want to see private practice boutique offices, or there's patients that say, hey, I want to go to a corporate office. I just want to get a tooth pulled, and that's a place for them to go. But we want to provide, in my office, we want to provide relationship dentistry. We get to know these patients. We get to know their families. Like I said, I'm out in the community. I see the patients, kids, families, all kinds of stuff like that. And that's the kind of healthcare that I do want to provide at the end of the day.
I love that. I feel like with that model, like you can be more empathetic to your patients. I think
Correct.
you have the ability to serve less patients because if you're at a corporate house, you probably have to double your patient load,
That is correct.
and you actually know what's happening in the community that may cause certain behaviors that either the patient can control or can't control. So I think that's a cool thing. We're going to touch on the insurance stuff a little later, but before we get into that, let's talk about your journey. Um, what explain kind of your upbringing and some of the experiences that you had that has kind of shaped how you practice today?
My upbringing, I come from Chamblee, Georgia. Obviously, we did go to high school together. I grew up in more past middle school is more so of a single family home or a single parent home. My mom she's an educator. She actually was a professor at Georgia College at the time, and she was a biology or science professor. Grew up with her, spending time with her in the labs, did night classes with her because I had to be with her because there was nobody else to watch us. So she'd be in the lab at 7, 8 at night, and I was there with her, my sister and I. So just seeing science, it always amazed me. And that was where the journey from science started. My mom is also very high in education. So education was at the first and foremost of everything that we did. We were actually zoned originally the neighborhood that we lived in to go to Cross Keys. And I know you know Cross Keys is not the best high school from an education standpoint. And so she said, you guys aren't going to Cross Keys. So we moved everything to a neighborhood right across the street from Chamblee because she knew Chamblee was a much better school. So that's the commitment that she had to ensure that we had the best education. Moving forward from there, I got a full football scholarship to play at the Citadel Military College in South Carolina. Spent 4 years there. And that's where I realized that dentistry was going to be the route that I wanted to choose. I did want to go a medical route of some sort, and I shadowed an orthopedic surgeon, and that was the route that I originally wanted to go due to a football injury. And I shadowed a couple surgeons, and one of the surgeons, he said something very interesting. He said, if I could do this all over again, I would be a dentist. And I looked at him like, dentist, like the people, they just come in the room and check your teeth. They're not doing these cool surgeries. They're not doing all these things that you're doing. And he said, no. He said, I have a real good friend who's a dentist, and he only works 4 days a week. He golfs on every Friday. He gets to spend time with his family. He's got to watch his kids grow up. And he's not bound to a pager being called to the hospital and things like that at all crazy times. And when he said that, that kind of resonated with me because eventually I knew I wanted to have a family. Eventually, I knew that I wanted to spend time with my kids because that was one thing that since my mom was always working, since she was always doing everything, she didn't really get to probably spend that time that she really wanted to spend with us. And so when he said that, I talked to my mom about it, and she said, I have a friend that I went to college with who actually practiced dentist in Charleston.
Mhm.
And so got his information, went to his office, and from that, the very first time meeting him, it was done. I realized that dentistry was for me. I and saw more than what I thought dentists actually did. Dentistry has an artistry component to it. It has obviously whole body health component to it. You're looking at you're looking not only at the mouth, you're looking at their airways, you're looking at their joints, you're looking at sinuses. You're not only looking at people's mouths. And so that's one thing that dentists or the medical field, some physicians don't feel like dentists are true doctors because we only work on teeth, and that's not true. We go through a lot of same training that physicians go through in the first 2 years of our dental school education. And there's a big medical component that's involved with it because you are working on the human body at the end of the day. So fast forward from there, I ended up working. I took a year off between undergrad and dental school, and I worked in his office for that entire year. Got my hand skills up. I worked in his lab, did his lab work for him. Got comfortable doing things that I feel like probably a lot of my classmates didn't have the luxury of doing because they went straight into dental school right after undergrad. Did that, applied to dental school, got into a couple different schools, but I ended up choosing the Medical College of Georgia. Um, and based off of tuition costs, all that kind of stuff. And you could only in-state residents could go to that school. So yes, that was my pretty much my journey and that was my upbringing that brought me to where I am today.
Doing these interviews, I've noticed that successful practitioners always have a series of mentors. Um, in your mind, what makes a good mentor of somebody who wants to be a professional, and what were the main impacts that that mentor had on your life?
I think a good mentor is somebody who, number one, is patient, because they have to be patient because you're going to have somebody that's completely oblivious to this field. And that's what my mentor, I was oblivious. I had no clue. And he was great from day one because when I went to his office, I was standing in the corner watching him work. And then he looked at me and he was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "Go there, go right there, put some gloves on." And then he was like, "Grab that. You're going to be right in the mouth with me." And it was like, whoa. So there was stuff flying everywhere because I didn't know what was going on. And for him to have the patience in order to do that, that said enough. Spoke volumes to me that he was willing to take me on and do all this stuff with me. Also, I hung out with him outside of the office. He took me to lunches. I hung out at his house, got to know his family. Um, so he ended up being almost like a father figure to me. And I just think that having that, and then he wasn't only, um, obviously he was a boss in a sense. He was my mentor. And he was, like I said, a father figure. So he did all those things and he probably didn't even realize what he was doing. To him, honestly, it just seemed like it was second nature to him.
Mm.
Um, and that was, from my opinion, is all the standards or the good qualities of a good mentor.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I think we don't talk a lot about us, especially in our community. Men mentoring men in a professional sense. I
Mhm.
think that that's a big element that you mentioned. One thing also you said was I developed my hand skills. I think somebody
Mhm.
who's not a dentist may not be familiar with that word. What do you mean by I've developed my hand skills?
So when I said develop my hand skills, uh, when you first get into, I know any healthcare field, you are nervous with everything because you don't want to hurt this person. You always, and that's one of the things, the first things we learn while we're in school is that there's a body attached to everything, and there's also a human being that's attached to that. So you have to be empathetic. You have to be gentle. I know everybody's heard horror stories of dentists that have been rough to them, treated them wrong, things like that. And that's not who I want to be, or that's not the persona that I want dentists to have. So developing hand skills, you're nervous, you don't know anything about what's going on. And so you're going to be slow, you're going to mess things up. And it all comes from repetition. You got to do the same thing over and over again. You do it over and over again, you get comfortable. That's pretty much with anything in life. Um, and so having that repetition a year before I even got to dental school is where I felt like I was a step ahead from a hand standpoint, because I was doing moldings, I was doing castings, I was putting teeth where they needed to be, and seeing things that you don't know of, and you don't have any knowledge of prior to going into school. And so that's where I meant from developing hand skills came from.
Very good. Now, from just the general population, what is something people need to improve upon as far as their oral health? Like, what is something that you're seeing in your patients? They're like, if you do this thing, it would make a significant difference.
That's an easy question to answer. Flossing. Flossing is you can change your life with doing that on a consistent basis. A lot of people think that they can do it every once in a while, or a vast majority of people don't even do it. I get patients that come in all the time. It's like, I don't floss my teeth. And they don't even have to tell me. I can look at the x-rays, I can look at pictures and say, hey, I already know you don't floss your teeth. Or there's sometimes I'll just ask them, and I know that they don't. And I'll look at their x-rays and can see cavities forming in between the teeth, or they develop gum disease because they're not flossing properly. And I'll ask them, and they're like, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't floss. And I was like, and I always say, well, I was waiting on you to tell me the right answer, because I can tell just by looking at what I'm seeing right now. But
Wow.
yes, that is one thing that, yes, for sure, that I see a lot of, and it's something very simple. It takes, if you get good at it, consistent with it, it takes less than a minute of your time to do, and it does wonders for your health.
Now, are you a proponent of flossing after every meal, or is one time a day adequate?
One time a day is adequate, and the one time a day is at nighttime. Because everything that you've been eating throughout the day, it sits on your mouth at nighttime. When you're sleeping and resting, your salivary flow diminishes, and saliva is a natural cleanser, and your mouth is a dry environment. Bacteria love that. They stick to everything, and they just feed on the food that's just sitting on your mouth at nighttime.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Now, what about the enhancement of a lot of people drinking the sugary drinks, whether it's coffee or beverages? Like, is that an impact at all as long as you're brushing your teeth, or is that's something that has to be concerned when people drinking lattes that have double sugar shots or whatever?
So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. When it comes to sugar, bacteria feed on the sugar, and that's what causes the disease or the cavity process to start. But if the enamel is weakened, that's how the bacteria can actually infiltrate the tooth. How does the enamel get weak? From acid. Acid is in every single thing that you drink that's not water. Coffee, Gatorade, energy drinks. Energy drinks are the big thing that I'm seeing right now, that a lot of people, kids especially, are they're drinking multiple energy drinks a day. And I have one patient, he's 16 years old, has no enamel on his teeth, because all he did was drink Gatorade all the time, switched around in his mouth, and it just ate away all the enamel on his teeth. Gatorade is highly, highly acidic. And I see your face right now, because as soon as and I had to do some digging with this kid to figure out what was he doing, because there was something off base that was causing this to happen so rapidly. And I had a conversation with him without any of his parents in the room. And he admitted, he was like, I literally just drank Gatorade all the time. And I said, that's what's doing it. And then when I told his parents that, they were like, oh my God, like it was an eye opening. They were like, I did not know that. And I said, all you have to do is there's a bunch of pH charts you can pull up, and Gatorade and Coke are at the highest, at the top tier for things that are acidic. And the more acid that you introduce to your mouth, the weaker it makes your enamel. And when your enamel is weaker, the bacteria can easily break down that enamel through the sugar and everything that happens. But it's not the sugar, it's the acid. That's the big thing.
Does drinking through a straw, does that help a little bit, or is it still in your mouth even though you're drinking through a straw?
So if you want to drink something, so if you drink something acidic like coffee, I'm drinking coffee right now. If you drink it through a straw, it does help. But when you drink anything that's acidic, you want to drink it rapidly because if you sip it for a long period of time, it takes 30 minutes for the saliva in your mouth to buffer, get everything back to a neutral environment.
Yeah.
So if you're sipping, then if you look at a chart, you your enamels, you take a sip. So you bring it down to a acidic level. And then as gives it some time, the pH starts to rise. You take another sip, it dips back down. And so you're constantly dipping, dipping, dipping. If you just take a huge gulp or you drink it really, really fast, you're not doing that constant dipping. And that constant dipping is what damages the enamel in your teeth. And then typically I always recommend patients if they drink a lot of acids or their teeth are already weakened, I'll recommend things like alkaline water. That's one thing that's a little bit more basic, but that's another controversial topic because people are saying that the alkaline water doesn't do good to your gut. And so that's another thing. But alkaline waters will help because it'll bring that environment up to a more basic environment a lot quicker than just a natural saliva.
Interesting. And I think the example that you have with the young child as far as doing the investigation, I think only in a private practice setting do you have the leeway to do that on a regular basis, to do that level of investigation. Would you agree on that point?
I agree with that 100%. Because you did bring up, we were talking about corporate dentistry. And when I was working in a corporate office, it was about numbers. They wanted numbers. They wanted you to see a certain amount of patients. They wanted you to produce a certain amount from the patients that you saw. And even though that was the philosophy, I still didn't quite succumb to that because in my heart, I didn't get into dentistry to make a lot of money. I got into it to help people. The reward from that can be good financially, but at the end of the day, if you take care of that person, the finances and the reward from that standpoint will come. And so in my heart, I couldn't just sit there and churn patients. And then obviously I have a license that I have to uphold. And if you're churning through patients, then you're not doing the best work at the end of the day. And there's a board that if you do mess something up, you will get reprimands on your license. And like I said, being an African American, I obviously get scrutinized a lot more for things that I do. And if I just slip up or just something happens, it's like, oh, well, he probably didn't know what he was doing anyway, and things like that. So that's why I always hold myself to a high standard in everything that I do.
What was it like being an African American going through dental school? Was that something that was it lonely? Were you used to it going to Chamblee and your college program? So you were used to that dynamic. People who get their doctorates usually have parents that are doctors. It's kind of like a consistent thing. Either they're into just smart folks, smart family, or they have the finances to support somebody through their doctor program. So how was it for you going through your doctorate?
It was tough. I wouldn't say it was lonely. We had the admissions director at the Medical College of Georgia was an African American female. So she took it upon herself to bring as many minorities into that school as humanly possible. For the Medical College of Georgia being a majority institution, our class had a 10% ratio. And so out of 70 total students, there were 7 of us that were African American. So it wasn't lonely. We all stuck together. We all studied together. We kind of confided in each other with a lot of different things. But it wasn't easy to fully answer your question. Like I did say, it was a majority institution. There were I don't think there were any faculty members that were African American. There was one. He was actually an oral surgeon, and he was actually one of the best oral surgeons in the country. Military guy, real good person. But but no, other than that, there weren't very many faculty members that were African American. And they, if you, so it's kind of, I went to military school. So going to military school, if you do things that stand out, you will get picked on, or you will essentially get reprimanded more. Same thing in dental school. If you do things that stand out, you will get reprimanded more, or you will get looked at in a way where you have a target on your back. There were instances, like I did say, I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but I feel like out of my class, I felt like I had, like I did mention my hand skills. There was a few members of our class that were lab technicians. They did other things prior to coming to dental school. Quite a few had parents that were dentists, or like you did mention, either health dentists, medical doctors, things like that. But they didn't really spend the time to get their hand skills up because I don't know, maybe they just felt like that they were just going to skate by because they were naturally gifted. I don't know. I always had to work at it. Was in the lab late at night, perfecting my craft. I was always in that lab. I got kicked out so many times by campus police because I was there late. I was hiding from the campus police when I knew they were coming around, so I wouldn't get kicked out, things like that. But I always wanted to be the best at everything that I did. And so sometimes that came with scrutiny because there would be times where instructors would bash me because they felt like I was doing too much.
Mm.
And so that was one of the biggest challenges that I had going through school, was trying to be the best that I could be, but not trying to stand out too much with what I was doing.
What is it like going inside somebody's mouth? Uh, like, I mean,
It's
can
a
you no longer see anybody smile the same way again? Like, are you like, what is that like? Can you turn it off and on? Like, what is that?
So to answer your first question, the mouth is it's a dark, it's a wet place. It's one of the most difficult areas in the body to work on, in my opinion. And then you will have various sizes, shapes. You got small mouths with kids. You even have adults that have small mouths. You have patients that can have a gag reflex. So as soon as you stick something in their mouth, they start gagging or they can throw up. Um, it is a very, very complicated place to work in. And then a lot of materials that we use have to be require the tooth to be dry. And so you have to do everything you can to isolate the area and make sure it's a dry environment. So it is a very, very difficult place to work. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So that's another thing. You have to be good at what you do because things can go south very, very quickly. And then you have a big hole in the back of the patient's mouth. That's the throat. And if something goes back there, it can get lodged in the lungs, and that's a bad day. Fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't had that happen since I've been practicing for 10 years, and I hope to stay that way. And to answer your second question, I can turn it off. I try to turn it off the best I can, especially when I'm out in public. But as you know, when you're at a party or something like that, as soon as somebody finds out you're a dentist, they start asking all kinds of questions. Or, hey, can you look at this in my mouth? I've always had this issue. So it gets turned on inadvertently.
Mm.
But I do try to turn it off. I'm not always looking in people's mouths when I'm in public, unless there are certain things. But my wife, since she works in the office, now she thinks she knows a lot about dentistry, and then she'll say make comments and things like that. But me personally, I turn it off the best I can.
Cool. So let's go into you're working in the corporate world as far as being a dentist, and explain the mindset you had when you were just about to go out on your own. What were you thinking? What was the emotion? So somebody who's younger in their dental profession, what is the thought process of somebody who has the courage to start their own practice?
It was a very, very scary feeling. Because I was going out on my own. I was opening an office with zero patients from day one. I'd signed all these loan documents where I was taking on a lot of debt. And so it was a very, very scary feeling and a very scary thought, to jump off and be on my own. And then on top of that, I have a family that I need to support. I am the sole income provider for our family. So raising four kids and being able to provide for them, that's the other scary thought or scary component that's on top of that as well. But with all that being said, that fear was also, it turned into motivation for me,
Mm.
because I knew that from day one, I can't fail. And if I fail, then there's a lot of people that are depending on me. So that's always, and that's still motivation to this day, because even now, like I mentioned earlier, we are very busy. We have quite a huge number of patients that are in my office, but there's still that fear that everybody can just stop coming to me at any given point in time, and they do have that choice. And so I still have to do what I need to do to continue to stay at that high level, provide the best care, and deliver the ultimate patient experience to ensure that we still have a great reputation in the community.
I was talking to an older dentist, the late great Dr. Marlon Jackson. He mentioned that the type of loans that dentists incur for starting their own practice, it's almost like student loans because they'll give you a lot of money.
Mhm.
Um, what is the emotions of taking on that amount of debt? Were you numb to it because you are possibly already had student loans, or like, did the number even was it real at the time?
The number was very real. It's there's you can't change that. You can't be numb. Well, me personally, I wasn't numb to it at all. Looking at that number, it was a very, very scary thing. But no, I was not numb to it. I'm very well of it. I'm still well aware of it, because being debt conscious, my biggest thing is I want to try to knock that debt off. Okay.
So as a new practice, you have to bring in patients. So what is the process of bringing on dental patients?
The process with bringing on dental patients starting from scratch is marketing. So marketing, sending out flyers. We are very fortunate that my office is a standalone building. So as soon as we were able to, from a permit standpoint from the city, I had a sign out there, saying that it was a dental office that was being built, had a phone number, email address, website, all that kind of stuff. Just saying coming soon, and just so people already knew what was developing right there. But having a standalone building, even to this day, is our number one marketing, or our number one uh, way we bring in patients to the office. Every single patient that comes in our door, we ask them how they found us, and that always I drove by or I saw the building being constructed. All of that is pretty much how a majority of patients find us. And there's quite a few other dentists in the area. There's actually one other dentist that's about a mile and a half away from me who has a standalone practice. But a lot of them are in strip centers or in shopping malls and things like that. And it's a little bit more difficult to get that visibility unless you do great, vast amount of marketing. And we've been very fortunate where we didn't have to spend a lot of money on marketing just due to the standalone building being the number one provider. Dental insurance is another way that we bring a lot of patients in as well. When you do sign up or you sign a contract with the insurance company, you go on their website, and when a patient has that dental insurance, they can call the insurance company or go to the website and see what providers are in network, and that's how they find their dentist, especially if it's in their neighborhood.
Now, explain the kind of pit in your stomach. Anybody who's done a major home renovation, built their house, knows that waiting for that thing to be done is a tough process.
Mhm.
Explain the emotions of watching your building, move the land, pour down the concrete. Like, what is that like?
That is, yeah, so I will say this, it was a very surreal feeling because my goal was out of school within 2 years, opening my own dental office. I didn't start the process of starting my practice until it was about 6.5 years in. So that was way past my original timeline that I set for myself. Now, mind you, I moved states, and life changes, things like that happen. So that's why the timeline changed. But ultimately, when the building process started, it literally was very surreal, to see all the work or all the dreams that I had was starting to come together. Secondly, I was there almost every time I could get a chance to go by to see what's going on, I was there, taking pictures, looking around, making sure the walls were being put up right, because obviously this is a huge endeavor, a huge undertaking from a financial and then also just the life situation. I want to make sure everything was going up right. But yes, it was very surreal for me to say the least.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, like you, well, like me, we're both married men,
Mm.
and we both married and went out on our own to start our own practice. What is it like, the communication you feel like is needed with the spouse when you're trying to go out on your own? And what was kind of the support your wife provided you to, you know, get you over those tough times? Because those tough days do come.
So my wife, she was very supportive from day one. Um, she obviously knowing me or being we've communicated quite a bit, and she knew that that was my ultimate goal. And as soon as I told her it was time and it was my time to get this done, she was like, "What can I do to help?" And so she's been there for me from day one. Um, from the practice standpoint, I designed the actual building itself. I designed it how I wanted it to be from the different practices that I worked in, how I wanted everything to flow from a functional standpoint. And she has her hands in as well because she did the interior decorating. So everything that you see from the flooring to the walls to the ceiling to the foyer area, she has her hands in all of that. So we pretty much have a joint combined effort in the design of everything and from the whole process from the start. And even to this day, she actually works in the office as well. She's the office manager. So she knows, she sees the grind, she sees everything that we're doing, or sees everything that happens from a daily standpoint. So it's not really tough conversations that we have.
I love that. I love that. Now, what's different from your practice versus mine is that you more than likely have to have employees, or at least have a staff, people to come and support you. How was that, being in that leadership role, knowing you're responsible for somebody's sometimes livelihood? Like, what is that experience like?
That's another obstacle as well because having employees that can be or that is the biggest headache from being a private practice owner. They're the highest overhead. So that's the one of the biggest percentages that a lot of our income goes to.
Yeah.
Um, and also, like you did mention, being a leader. And I will say, even from out the gate. I can't say that I knew everything that I was doing from a practice standpoint because I didn't. This was something new to me. I've been in offices, I've done other things, I've seen other people, but when you do it yourself, it's a completely different thing. It's also like being a parent. You don't know everything from day one. You've seen your parents, you've seen other people being parents. You don't know everything about parenthood until you're fully in it. So that same thing applies to being a dental practice owner. And so having staff is like having another set of children. You have to make sure that they're happy. You got to make sure that they're fed. You got to make sure, and especially working with all women, then you have to worry about cycles and things like that aligning and emotions. You have to be there to comfort them at times of when something isn't right, it goes on in the office. A patient says something negative to them, they feel some type of way, have to be there for that. There's also life things that can happen outside of the office, and family issues, death, all kinds of stuff like that. There's all kinds of barriers, all kinds of components. Every day is something different. But it's all been a learning curve. I'm still working on my leadership skills. And that's something that's still ever evolving from a daily standpoint for me.
What has being a leader taught you the most of that you apply in your daily life? Like, how has it transformed? I tell anybody, if you go out on your own, after a couple years, you're going to be a different person. You're going to have a different perspective on what it takes to operate in the real world. So, what is your take on being a leader of people? Like, how's that changed you?
How it's changed me is learning how to um, basically have humility because as a leader, you have to recognize when something goes wrong. And if it goes wrong, you have to take ownership with it. You can't blame other people for it because that's not what a good leader does. And that's the biggest thing, and that's the biggest takeaway. And that's one thing you definitely have to train your mind to do, because immediately you want to poke blame or you didn't do that right. And it's like, you got to take a step back. Why didn't you do that right? Did I teach you how to do that properly? Or did I even tell you what I wanted? And so that's the biggest thing, because I always have inner dialogue with myself to sit here and say, they didn't do that right. That wasn't up to my standard. Why didn't they do that? And then learning and growing, I've had to ask those questions to myself. And that's one of the things. Did I teach them how to do that properly, or did I tell them exactly what I wanted? And most of the times the answer is no. And so then I have to correct that and say, hey, this is how I want this done, or this is how we want things to be. And so when you set that expectation and set that standard, it changes everything. And that's one of the biggest things that my biggest takeaway from being a leader is just you have to be accountable to yourself, and hold yourself to a certain standard before you can poke blame or scrutinize somebody else for something that you never taught them to do.
That's big. So this is Practice Prosperity. So how should a dental practice owner think about growing their wealth? So you have the practice, which is building equity. You have the income from it. You have the owner distribution. Like, how do you think about building wealth as a practice owner?
I think about building wealth as a practice owner as, especially from a business standpoint, year-to-year growth. I like to see growth from every year that we've been open, because if we're not growing, the only thing, everything is going up. Overhead is going up, supply costs are going up, water is going up. All of that, everything goes up throughout the year. And so we have to be able to stay with that. Employee costs go up. You want to give raises, you want to give bonuses, things like that. And so that's the biggest bottom line thing that I look at from a practice equity standpoint is growth throughout the practice. And if we have that growth, we're able to do more things for our staff. We're able to do more things from technology. We're able to do more things, and then ultimately I can take home more personally. But the main focus is being able to grow the business. So that's the biggest thing, is the more income we have, we always put more in the business. And I'm also a big proponent of education. And from an education standpoint, dentists need 40 hours every 2 years in order to maintain their license. I do probably around 200, 250 every year, and every single year, not every 2 years. And that's because, same thing like I've been saying, I always want to be the best at what I do. I'm always trying to grow, always trying to learn. And so that's where a lot of uh, income from the business, it goes towards education as well.
Wow, I like that reinvestment. Beyond education, how do you think about reinvesting your business? Like, is it putting up a new sign within the office? Like, what are ways that you think about strategically putting money back into the business to cause that growth to manifest itself?
Ways that we do that are mainly through, uh, that's a good question. Putting money in the business, like I did mention, education is one. Number two is technology.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
Things are always, the medical field is always growing, is forever changing. There's always new equipment that it's out there. Um, so things like, we've been able to invest in a 3D scanner. And it's literally a camera that you put inside of a patient's mouth, and you wave it around, and it draws a 3D digital image of what's inside their mouth. We can do multiple things with that. We can use that for patient education. We can show them instantly their full mouth without having to take a series of pictures. And also, we can use that for like, if somebody wants bleaching trays, we can take that image, 3D print it, and they can have bleaching trays, or they can have retainers, or they can do Invisalign with that 3D image. So investing in technology can also help from a patient comfort, because typically we'd have to take those alginate impressions, and that's that gooey stuff that you put in the tray, put in somebody's mouth. And I did mention before, gagging. People who have a very, very sensitive gag reflex, They can't tolerate that. It's a terrible, miserable experience. And just having a camera that you wave around in their mouth, they don't have experience any of that. But yes, technology, I feel like is one of the biggest things that we like to reinvest in the business for.
Any money advice you give somebody just going into practice for themselves, like keep an eye on this line in your budget, or make sure you do this with your money? Like any advice you would give somebody?
The biggest advice I would give somebody from a money standpoint would be once you start making money and it's a positive number, it's positive growth, you have more money coming in than what you're paying for bills each month. Don't go spending it. Don't get too happy with it because that is one you're going to have an itch because you're going to do it. You're like, oh, I'm finally making money. I can do this. I can do that. Pump the brakes. You need to sit down and let that money grow because you can easily start spending and then you get in a bad habit. And if you spend too much, then you're starting to all that money that's coming in, you're starting to pay more bills. You're going to have more bills to pay. But if you want to sit down, and I'm trying to think of the word that I want to say with this, but basically, um, you have to have self-control. And with that self-control, if you just let money come in, just let it keep coming in, build up savings, build up a rainy day fund, do all these things, and not trying to keep up with the Joneses. That's the big one. You do all that, you will have more money than you can think of at the end of the day. And then also you'll have the freedom to do some of the things that paying down more debt. You pay down debt, then you can get rid of these loans quicker. And that's another thing that we're focused on right now is paying down loans and getting rid of our debt as quickly as possible.
One thing that's I kind of claim from you is that you have like I would say an internal competition going inside of you to be the best. And I noticed that from a lot of successful practice owners, they have that drive, that willingness to do 200 hours of continued education, that want to be the best. Kind of speak on that aspect and the necessity of that to continue to grow as a practice.
Um, I feel like and like you did say, the want to be the best, that's always the drive that I've had ever since I got into this field. And my wife can tell you this as well, because she sees all the videos that I watch and she knows all the trips that I'm going on for continuing education. It all boils down to being a minority in this field. Like I said before, only 3.8% of US dentists are African American. And so I feel like, and from what I've heard, just from things that I've seen, the way other or minority practitioners have been treated, is that there is, I'm just trying to tiptoe my wording on this, but we are a lot of times looked at less than. Even though we are in this position, we got the degree, we have passed our board exams, we have the licensure, we've gone through all of these steps and checks in order to be a practitioner. You still will be scrutinized at the end of the day. And the way our country is set up is minorities have been suppressed for a very long time, and it's still going on to this day. And for me, I feel like if I have more tools or I feel like I have everything that I can to fight against that, I'm going to do it. And that's why I push the education. That's why I push myself to be the best at what I can, to have the knowledge at what I can, because I want to be at a position that if something were to ever happen, or if somebody wants to try to debate or try to say something, it's like, look, I got this knowledge. I've been doing this for a long time. I have all this education, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm at a point right now because I always wanted to please everybody. I wanted everybody to love me. I wanted everybody to be happy with what I did. But the more I've been practicing, the more I've learned you're not going to please everybody. And that goes with every aspect of life. Once I learned that I can't please everybody, it was kind of like an enlightening experience because then I get a point where I say, hey, if we don't align with, if your philosophy doesn't align with mine, or if you don't believe in me, or if you don't believe in what I'm telling you, you are welcome to find somebody else to go treat you. And that's a very, very liberating thing to do and to say, because then it's like, we don't have to argue. There's no, if you don't want to listen to me or if you don't believe in what I'm telling you, you can find somebody else and you guys can have this conversation, or you can find somebody that aligns more with what you want at the end of the day. And I'm probably not that person for you. But yes, that is the biggest drive, biggest motivator is just because I am a minority in the field, and I want to, I don't want to be scrutinized, even though it's inevitable. But I just want to add more to make it so that doesn't happen quite as often, essentially.
I like that. I think the beautiful part of practices and why I like this field is we get to choose our customers. It's
Hmm.
almost like we get to choose our bosses in some way, and
Hmm.
and I think that peace of mind is valuable, especially once you reach a scale to the point where that income is not needed from that single customer. I think that's an
Hmm.
amazing thing. So, what is next for you? Do you see yourself adding more dentists under you? Do you want to stay a solo practitioner with the increasing staff? What do you think the future holds for your company?
So my next steps right now, or I did mention that we've in the process of starting to drop insurance companies. Another reason why we're dropping insurance companies is because whenever you sign that contract with that insurance company, you are taking a hit of your fees. So that's like, say somebody works at Amazon, they go to work and um, Amazon says, oh, well, on top of taxes and everything else, we're just going to take 40% off of your check just because you come work for Amazon. And so that's what happens with insurance companies that we sign contracts with. So we've dropped MetLife. MetLife, their highest fee reduction was 47% off of my usual and customary fees. And 47% is a lot of money. It adds up over time. And with, like I just mentioned, raising costs, raising healthcare, things like that, we, as a business owner, I need to be able to have income coming in, and it needs to be income that is um, basically worth the time that I spend. And if my time is valued and that comes from an insurance company standpoint, then I have to see a lot of patients in a day. And seeing a lot of patients, like we did say, the quality, or like I mentioned before, the quality will go down. And so dropping insurance companies that have the highest reduction in the fees will ultimately help our bottom line, number one, also make it so we don't have to see quite as many patients. The less patients that I can see, ultimately, we're trying to cut back on the time that I'm spending in the office. And it's not from a sense of, I got into this because I'm my own boss and I want to dictate what I want to do. The one thing that I want to be able to do is spend more time with my family, spend more time with my kids, see them, see their events at school, be able to go to school to do these things. And when I reducing hours, I'll be able to spend time with them. And then also it won't change the bottom line numbers or the income that's coming in. And that's the next move that we're trying to make. To answer your question in regards to having another dentist come in, that is in the works down the road. Right now, we're still at a point where we're still trying to stabilize everything, trying to get everything right. We're coming up on 4 years right now. We're still trying to get everything figured out, but that is the eventual goal. And having another dentist, that will make it so even I could have the ability to take more time because somebody else is there. And I don't have to worry about, because when I'm not in office, a lot of times obviously the revenue goes down because there's not a dentist there. Hygienists can still see patients, but they can only do preventative cleanings, and preventative cleanings aren't they're not a big income procedure. And so if we can have an associate that's there doing procedures, then when the office doesn't have to close down. So that is another eventual goal that we do have as well.
And I mentioned this, and we do have to touch on this a little bit. The concept of private pay, getting away from the insurance carrier, being able to charge your full fee. Um, and I see this a lot for practitioners, especially ones like yourself who strive for excellence. They do move into the more of a concierge type situation where they charge the high premium value, but they provide that high premium value. Like, how do you see that evolve in your practice? Do you believe you'll always take insurance? Do you think you could go into a level where you're mostly concierge? What do you think about that?
I would like to get there. To be quite frank and quite honest with you, I do want to get to a point where we are a fee for service office, and we will still bill your insurance, we'll file your insurance, but it'll just be the out of network benefits. So because a lot of people think fee for service, they're not going to take my insurance. We file your insurance. That's a different thing. We're just not contracted with them. And so it's a different scenario or situation with that. Yes, and like you did mention, with all the education that I've been doing and everything that I've been learning, it's also putting me up where, with all the knowledge that I have and the skill set that I do have, I would I want to be compensated for it. And taking 30% fee reduction is not properly being compensated for that. And it's the time. And everybody always, there's a lot of things that are out there. It's like, oh, you charged me $200 and that took you 10 minutes. And no, it's not 10 minutes. It's been 10 years, and it's been all of these thousands of hours of educations that I have. That's why I'm charging that. It's because the skill set, the knowledge, the time that's involved with that, not the amount of time that I'm physically taking to do that procedure, because you can give that to a new grad out of school. It may take them 2 hours to do. And that's the big difference with that. And so I do want to get to a point where, yes, we are a little bit more exclusive, and that is the beauty of being a private practice owner.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Majors. I think you dropped the nuggets, the emotions of going into business for yourself. What is it actually like, and what do you see in the future? I think that story alone is going to help a lot of people. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Randall. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
If you've been inspired to leverage your practice to create financial freedom, please schedule a consultation with Diesel Wealth Management. The legacy you dreamed of is a 15-minute phone call away from becoming a reality.
The more I know, the more money I can make.